Welcome, Jonathan. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you for your interest
Thank you,
in
Mayor.
interviewing for the Tumwater City Council,
Mm-hmm.
position number one.
Mm-hmm.
This is a video interview that we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Is my understanding you cannot make the live interview tomorrow, which
If I can just say, I'm very grateful to you, Mayor, and to the council for accommodating this conflict that I have. So really, thank you and the council members.
Sure, our pleasure. So we have 30 minutes.
Mhm.
I'll ask you 6 questions in
Okay.
30 minutes. And then I have a closing question at the end where you can kind of fill in anything that you want to at the very end.
Okay.
And here we go. So, and you can allocate your time however you feel appropriate
Okay.
between the questions. So the first question is, what skills and interests will you bring to the council to contribute to the council, mayor, and staff having a constructive working relationship?
I am an anthropologist, and I got a degree in anthropology, a PhD in 1999, and I have spent more than 20 years in Guatemala, and more recently in China, in addition to those 20 years, working with people of different cultural backgrounds, different ethnicities, different languages. And my tasks in Guatemala were to reach across all kinds of boundaries: social, economic, ethnic, linguistic, cultural, to get things to happen for the betterment of people. And indeed, in Guatemala, I was working with local Maya-speaking groups on a sustainability project. So, and as an anthropologist, I'm trained to study and understand differences between people. So I think that training does really, not to be immodest, it does really well prepare me for this position. My work has emphasized localities and preserving diversity and culture and history. And so I think, and also it has emphasized working with people at all different levels. For example, government. In Guatemala, working with federal officials, with governors of the equivalent of states there, with mayors of towns, and also with local individuals and local cultural groups, as well as local officials. So these are the kinds of things that this is the training that I think that does prepare me. And since it's my project had to do with not only archaeology, but with sustainable development, in consideration of the key challenges that we're facing now, I think I'm really pretty well equipped to help the town and you, Mr. Mayor, and the council members deal with the very serious challenges that we face.
Great. Well, thank you.
Mhm.
Just a follow-up. I noticed in your application you mentioned that your parents are buried here in Tumwater. Did you
Sure.
grow up in Tumwater then?
I did not.
Okay.
No. So I am fairly new here. I came in the summer of 2016, straight back from China. Started teaching at the local community colleges here. But no, I am not. This is. I feel very close to it because I feel very close to my mom's side of the family, and she was born and raised here, and my parents are both buried here, which I think indicates my father also felt an attachment.
Very good. Thank you. Council positions are nonpartisan, but the electorate is polarized. Tell us how you will be able to balance the expression of your own personal political philosophy on a nonpartisan council.
Sure. I have distinct political views and opinions. I do not seek to conceal those. However, when speaking with people at all different levels of commitment, involvement, whatever, in the social hierarchies, and my first instinct, and it's the practice that I have followed, is to listen, to ask questions and to listen to people. I don't want to, if I tip my hat and I start off telling people what my political views are, it's going to very often slant what happens, after that in the colloquy. So I want to listen first. And also, I think that everybody is different. And once we get past labels and assumptions about people, there's a great common ground. We're all human beings, and we all have great similarities and concerns and issues. So I can even talk to people on the other side of the fence from me and identify with maybe many of their concerns. But we need to get past the jargon, the labels, and the assumptions that we bring. So my instinct would be to listen and to find common ground.
Very good, thank you.
Mhm.
So Washington State and the city of Tumwater have a very strong set of laws and policies to protect diversity in the workplace and the general population. You kind of talked a little bit about this already, but what efforts have you made in your own life to understand, accept, and work with people different from you?
I was lucky in my childhood. I was raised with parents who strongly believed in not only accepting differences between people, but welcoming and celebrating those differences. So when I was a little kid, in the late 1950s, I participated in integrated groups. This was really before the civil rights movement, so to indicate that I go back in time. I'm no spring chicken, but I was raised in a household that valued diversity, and it was there for quite a natural step for me to go from being a filmmaker, which was my previous career before I became an anthropologist, to go into anthropology, which is all about difference. And again, celebrating it, helping to preserve it, to work with it as things change. So, boy, that's really at the heart of who I am.
Great.
Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Mayor?
right.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, thank you. Very interesting. So a lot of what we deal with is public safety issues. Could you describe the role that law enforcement officers play in our community from your perspective and your philosophy on policing in general?
When I was campaigning for a seat on the council this past summer, I took a drive-along opportunity with one of the police officers here in town, and it was fascinating. This officer, he was excellent. I learned more about the crisis, the opioid crisis that even in Tumwater we have. I have always respected police people. They have a hard job. They see the ugliness of what people can do, and that's tough. And so I have great respect for people in the law enforcement profession, and great sympathy for what they do, and they do a very important job for us. So, even though I have politics, and I talk to people who profess to have similar politics as mine, some of these folks automatically denigrate, police, and I do not do that. When I was living in Manhattan, New York City, I lived there for more than 9 years. I can recall incidents where I was in police stations, not because I had done anything wrong, but I had lost something or I was the victim of a robbery, and seeing the interaction between citizens and how they would rant and rage at the police in New York City, and I said, "What's going on?" It's that would to me is crazy. So I have great sympathy for police people, and I think the police chief here is doing a good job. It seems to me. I did speak candidly with the patrolman that I was with on this drive along. It lasted about 3 hours. We went all over, Tumwater, So it was quite a learning experience.
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, could you speak a little bit more about your philosophy about policing in general?
Well, I think that, I think that, look, to be candid, I would expect that a majority of policemen, policewomen in the U.S. probably slant more to the right in their politics, and often with attitudes on that side of the fence, there can be instances of intolerance, and, for example, profiling, racial profiling and things like that, which I think is not acceptable. I think the folks here in Tumwater are really, really pretty good, and I think in general the Pacific Northwest is pretty good in those attitudes with regard inside the police departments. So I'd be I would be concerned about issues that have come to the fore elsewhere in the country with regard to how police departments and police officers deal with minorities, people with different languages, speaking different languages, who are here in the U.S. I would be concerned to make sure that there's an understanding that everyone, no matter without regard to their skin color, their language, their ethnicity, their background, is treated completely the same as anyone else in this country. So that would be my concern. But I don't think it's a great concern here in Tumwater.
Great, thank you, appreciate that clarification. A member requires constant communication with various groups, businesses, and internal staff. Give us an example of where you've effectively dealt with various issues driven by multiple stakeholder interests, and what steps did you take to make this a success?
Sure. Well, the example that I would use is the project that I have directed in Guatemala. The stakeholders were as follows. The Cultural Ministry of Guatemala, because the project involved studying and preserving an ancient Maya city that is located immediately below and around a contemporary small town in Guatemala. So world cultural heritage, the whole world, we're all a stakeholder with regard to this ancient Maya city, because the ancient Maya are so important in human history in terms of the complex culture that they developed. So number one, and this is not in any order of importance because these are all at least equal. World cultural heritage, the country, the nation of Guatemala is another stakeholder with regard to this. The archaeological community around the world, and specifically in Guatemala, there are other stakeholders. The state of Suchitepeques, which is an equivalent to a state in the United States, that is a stakeholder also. They have issues, and they have budgets, and they have concerns with regard to cultural legacy and with regard to the living people in the town today. So then going even lower down in the political hierarchy, I had to the other stakeholders would be the local mayors. And there's a principal mayor in charge of the municipality, which includes several different towns. So I had to deal with him also, that he is another stakeholder that I had many discussions with, and finding common ground. And then in the small town, there were two mayors, and there were heads of 12 different neighborhoods in this town. So and then there's what's called the cofradia, which consists of a group of elders who were very important also with regard to the cultural heritage of the town. And there was the the fellow who was in control, who directed a group of people who were charged with the responsibility of maintenance of the water system there. Because I was digging and we were finding an ancient water system there, very impressive. So I was dealing with them also. And then local businesses in the town, as well as local residents. And we employed about 150 different people from the local town in our project. So these are all different stakeholders. And I, as the director of this project, I had to, and it was challenging but very rewarding, reach across all kinds of boundaries, that would ordinarily divide people, to make things work as best as I could. And again, I'm a privileged white person, so dealing with the Maya, very poor Maya, that's a big reach.
Okay.
So the question, let's see here, Kate. Constantly, every day that I was in the field, I had to answer literally hundreds of questions. People would come up to me all the time, staff people, students, graduate students who were in training and helping with the project, and all of these different people and their representatives. So it was complicated, and many, many issues and challenges came up with regard. For example, there would be people who local residents who, in their little tiny plots growing coffee, would discover ancient artifacts. And the law requires them to turn those artifacts over to the government. And since I had a long-term permit there, I represented the government of Guatemala and the cultural ministry. And the laws require taking those ancient artifacts for cultural preservation. So there were many, many times when there were issues, and I had to work around those and hope that the farmer, the local resident, would understand that and would indeed turn over the pot, the ancient vessel, or the ancient piece of sculpture or whatever. So this was a big issue. And another thing, the project paid the farmer for every coffee plant that we had to remove or destroy when we dug down. So we arranged a price for that so that the farmer was fairly compensated, and so we were able to really get things going that way. This is just the very few small examples of the countless things I had to do, countless problems. The political problems in Guatemala, Mayor, they continue to be really severe. There was a genocide in Guatemala in the late 1970s and early 1980s, and I was, are we running out of time?
No, we're good.
Oh, we're good. So I had to deal with history too. 500 years of violence and racism and exploitation, culminating in death squads and genocide. And there was a coup d'etat in 1954 in Guatemala arranged by our CIA. So American taxpayer money contributed to the worst devolution of life in Guatemala from the time of the conquest in the 16th century. So, boy, in every way I was involved, and historically, who I represent, they had to understand where I was coming from in all of this, and that I was not the ugly American, coming to take. So, in a sense, the most important stakeholder for me were the local Maya living today in that town. They were number one, for me, and the archaeology was secondary. So whatever I could do for the sustainable development of that town and the area there, that's what I was really there to do. And I could go through countless examples of issues that I had to deal with there.
Well, good. Well, great story. Interesting.
Thank you.
background. Uh, Tell us about a time when you were frustrated by or had challenges dealing with a person. Tell us how you managed to work effectively with that person and maintain an ongoing professional relationship.
Well, once again, I think I have to return to my project there. I wish I could use an example in local government here, in Tumwater, for example, but I think any challenge that I might face, and this is not by any means to, suggest in any way that you, Mr. Mayor, or the council members do not confront great challenges. I know that you do. The population going to be doubling soon, traffic problems, these are big, big problems. But one issue I can recall in Guatemala was a really tough one. In 2005, before we went into the season, the field season over the summer, a former comandante in representing the army, the Guatemalan army, took over the project headquarters in the town. And he did this in order to operate a swindle. He was going to take money from former members of what are called the Patrulla de Autodefensas Civiles, which is basically a military organization. And during the genocide and after, it was the paramilitaries who committed the atrocities, the worst atrocities. So this guy to me, he was a bad guy. And the swindle was to take money from former members of the paramilitary, and these guys were most often, forced to join the paramilitaries at the point of a gun, to join these little groups that would go around and then do the killing. There was a supposed communist insurrection. That was a lie. So this guy was involved in bad stuff. The swindle was to take money from former members of these paramilitary units to get them to be compensated for their efforts in a sense as members of the military, because they were not paid for this work as paramilitary. And so this was part of a whole campaign swindle, in effect, by the right-wing party down there to get more votes. And specifically, the legislature in Guatemala had said this is against the law to take money to process these claims. Do you follow what I'm saying? It's a little bit difficult.
So I think the question, though,
Yeah.
focuses on
How did
you
I deal with
that person in particular?
Well, it was really hard, and I can't say that I was successful. I could not deal with him. I would talk to him every day that I was there, and he would just smile at me and say, well, we're using your facilities, doctor, he would say, because it makes him, look good. He wanted the background of this office. I mean, it sounds incredible, but this is in fact what happened. I couldn't talk to him. I went everywhere in Guatemala, spoke to the mayor, the governor of the state, members of the legislature, cabinet ministers, trying to get some help for this. Finally, I spoke to a general in the army. I was giving a speech before the local businesses there, and I saw him in the audience, and I went up and I said, please help me. Can you talk to this fellow? And I think that's in effect what happened. I didn't want anything violent to happen, but I think the general, this guy who was in the military at the time, he did pass the word to this guy. So I'm not particularly happy with the route that I took to fix this. I tried repeatedly to talk to the fellow and to try to get him to leave, but he simply would not. He was getting money, big wads of money from these direly poor people. So I mean, that's the most difficult, and I can't claim that it was a great success, except after 6 months, the guy was gone.
All right. All right.
That's what happened.
Interesting. Well, we're almost out of time,
Yeah.
so I just wanted to know, is there anything else you'd like the council to know about you?
Really, I really want to stress how I really care about this community. I wasn't raised here, but it's a beautiful town. I've always felt closer to my mom's side of the family, and the fact that she was born and raised here has always been a real pull to me to come back here. I mean, I knew her brother who lived out here as well. My brother has a house up in Bellingham, so I'm really connected to this. I have extended family around Spokane, so this is where I really want to be. And after I finished my 4.5 years teaching in China, I could really pick where I wanted to come back to, and this is where I come back to the U.S. And this is where I wanted to be. So this is an important, community. It faces big challenges. The issue that I've been pushing is how we're responding to climate change. And we could have spent hours talking about this, Mayor. I want to commend you and the council for working on this, and the people on TCAT, and Tom Oliver for his work on the group overseeing that. So, that's the issue that I've been pushing, but I want to do whatever I can that preserves and improves the quality of life here. These are good people here. I've noticed the people are friendly here. And on the campaign trail, I met wonderful people who gave me wonderful ideas that I was, hoping to institute or at least propose to you and the other council. So and I think also, I'll just say lastly, I think I do have skills that would be very useful to you and the other council members and to the community as we go into the future. I really do. I have no personal desire, no ambition to be a politician or to occupy a seat on the council or in any, it's just I want to do something good. And I'm driven by my experiences in Guatemala, but also because I care about the people here. That's
Very good.
what I want to stress.
Oh, great. Well, thank you. So.